In today's session, we will cover what is data binding and what are different types of data binding in AngularJS.
Hello friends, welcome to our channel WaveTutorials, and you are watching AngularJS full tutorial session. And also I request you to, if you have still not subscribed to our channel, then please subscribe to it and don't forget to click on that notification bell icon so that you will get the notification whenever we upload a new video on this channel. Also, if you found the content of our video is valuable, then please like the video, and in case of any query you can write a comment in comment box. So let's start with today's session.
Data binding in AngularJS is a mechanism for binding data values to HTML. So here HTML is our presentation layer. It allows us to define communication between component and views. So here you can communicate between your source file and your presentation layer. In AngularJS, we have two types of data binding. One is one-way data binding and another one is two-way data binding. In one-way data binding, our data flow either from component to view or from view to component. To move our data from component to view, we will use interpolation binding, property binding, and also with this we have attribute binding, style binding, etc. The flow of data from view to component, we can use event binding. And in two-way binding, it's a combination of property binding and event binding, which allow us to move our data either from component to view or from view to component. Now let's discuss about all the data bindings in detail. So let's start with interpolation binding. Interpolation is of one-way data binding type, where text should be written in between a set of curly braces like this. Angular replaces that text with the string value of the corresponding component property. So here you can see that it's a one-way data binding where data flow from component to view using interpolation, and you can move and display your data using interpolation, which is a set of curly braces. Next is property data binding. Property data binding allows us to bind the view of the template expression. In simple term, property binding is defined as updating the value of certain variable in component and displaying it in view. This is the one-way mechanism. Thus, it allows us to change the value whenever we want, but only at component level. You can see in this graph that the data is traveling from component to view, which is one-way data binding. And the syntax of using property binding is within the square bracket, and you can pass your variable to that property. The next one is event data binding. Event data binding is different than previous interpolation and property binding. Here the data flows from HTML to component. Event data binding is defined as updating or sending the value of certain variable from presentation layer to the component. So here you can see that we have a button here which execute a click function, and that function is written in component, and the data is sending from HTML to component. So whatever property binding we have discussed is supporting one-way data binding. Now here we have two-way data binding. Two-way data binding is a combination of both property and event binding, and it is a continuous synchronization of data from view to component and component to view. Two-way data binding is mainly used in data entry form, where the user changes the presentation layer and make the changes in component. The changes made in the component's data should sync to the view and should immediately update the model into the corresponding component with the view data. You can see here that the data travel in both sides, in component and as well as in HTML. So the syntax of two-way binding is a round bracket in between a square bracket. So if you remember that we have used round bracket in case of event binding and square bracket in case of property binding. So here the two-way data binding is combination of both property and event binding, where you can sync your data from component to view and from view to component. So in this session we have covered the theoretical part of data binding in AngularJS. In our next sessions we will cover all the practical sessions with data binding using interpolation, property binding, event binding, and two-way binding. So if you still have any query or question, please post a comment in comment box, or you can also write to me at wavetutorials@outlook.com. I also request you to please subscribe to our channel if you still have not subscribed it, and also follow our page WaveTutorials at linkedin.com. My name is Naveen, and thank you for watching this tutorial.